how people's preferences for private sector can be balanced with growth in public spending is something we need to think about. And Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana is a very interesting experiment. It's also an experiment which has some huge challenges because it pays for hospitalization care. It doesn't pay for the initial preventive care. And so the cost of RSBY treatment is going up and its fiscal stability remains sort of problematic. Okay? But clearly that's been one of the more successful programs. Okay. There are also some new problems that we haven't thought about. Okay? And these new problems require different responses and not more of the same. Okay? The first example is just the disease transition. Okay? I think that while we recognize that over time we'll be dealing with diseases of the lifestyle and cardiovascular disease and heart disease and so on, our service provisions have not really been responsive or changed according to it. Okay? As epidemiological transition occurs and as infant mortality goes down, communicable diseases go down, we'll be dealing more with things like blood pressure, heart attacks, cancer, and other diseases, which are often been called the diseases of the life cycle, okay, lifestyle. And what's more actually is that these diseases are higher among Indian population living abroad. Okay? If you look at Indians living in United Kingdom, they have 1.5 times as great a likelihood of dying from heart disease as the native-born British population. Similar observation has been in the US context. Okay? Whether it's Indian genetics or is it Indian diet, I have no idea. Okay? But the fact that that is the case is something we need to be cognizant of because that could become the next epidemic that India has to deal with. Let's see. The second issue is, and I'm not going to go into detail here, is antibiotic resistance. Okay? We have been paying very little attention to issue of antibiotic resistance. As this graph you can see, the number of doses of antibiotics sold in India has skyrocketed between 2005 and 2009. Okay? And antibiotic resistance is going to be a big issue that we are going to have to deal with over time. Most of the things that we are able to deal with, most of the service provision that we sort of address, we do well with campaign type mode. Okay? So for example, polio campaign is extremely successful. Okay? But DPT, which has to be done sort of more, polio, you just give it to people at the street corner. And you can do it in a campaign mode. DPT is something where you need actually a child's vaccination record because you can't really give too many doses of DPT. Okay? DPT rate has not gone up nearly as much as polio rate. So, or not disease rate, but immunization rate for DPT has not gone up as much as immunization for polio. And part of it is because we succeed much better when we do campaign mode than sort of sustained interventions. Okay. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is policy realism. Okay? I think, if I can't keep a count of number of schemes that exist in India. Okay? At some point in time, somebody was doing a count at a district level, and they had counted 380 schemes, okay, that were available. We have this vast number of schemes, and many of them, we haven't thought about whether they're going to succeed or not, whether they're designed to succeed or not. Okay? So for example, if you look at right to education, okay? Remember I just talked about this flat learning profile, okay? Right to education basically has this very emotional appeal where we say that children should be placed in a classroom suitable to their age, okay? But if they haven't learned certain skills, putting them in classroom suitable to their age essentially ensures their failure. Okay? So, tugging at the heartstrings may not be as productive towards increasing the skill level. And frankly, I have been personally administering a lot of skill tests to kids in 9th, 10th standards, kids who are 15 to 18, many of them are in 9th, 10th, 11th, etc. And it's painful to see these youngsters who cannot read and how embarrassed they are. Okay? One of the reasons we actually see this large dropout between class 8 and 9 is because up to class 8 there is automatic promotion, and class 9 is when you start seeing examination. Okay. Food, okay? Again, National Food Security Act is going to be big. It's going to be something that we are going to have to deal with it. And there is a general argument seems to be that let's focus on food subsidy towards a priority group, okay? And they use the term priority group because nobody really wants to define who the priority group is, okay? And part of the problem, and we currently do have already targeted public distribution system. One of the problem is it's so difficult to identify the poor, okay? For a number of reasons. One is it's conceptual. Okay, you give out BPL cards, they're supposed to last at least 5 years, okay? But that assumes that you can identify people who are going to stay poor. Okay, they're poor and they will stay poor. What if poverty is more of a function of illness, job losses, all the transient phenomena, rather than a chronic phenomena? Okay? And we don't even have data that will tell us what proportion of our poverty is chronic, what proportion of our poverty is transient. There are measurement issues because ultimately you are essentially looking at people's economic status, which is self-reported. Okay? Obviously, there are a bunch of errors in it. There are political economic issues where political patronage grants you a BPL card. I have actually done an interview in a household with Pradhan in a village where Pradhan was too embarrassed for himself to have a BPL card. He had an APL card, his son had a BPL card. Okay, this is something, again, comes from 2005 data that I mentioned earlier, where the blue line is people with BPL cards, red line is people with APL cards, above poverty line, below poverty line, okay? And this is their consumption expenditure, and you can see the two curves are very similar, okay? Somebody has a below poverty line card, somebody doesn't have it, okay? The red line, which is sort of below the poverty line, where I have sort of marked with the red circle, those are the people who should have a BPL card but have been excluded out of having a BPL card. The people above, on the right side of the poverty line, are people with the blue line or the blue dot, are the people who shouldn't have a BPL card but have it. So we have enormous errors of inclusion and exclusion, okay? Can we really give out, target the poor, identify and target the poor? Personally, I'm convinced it's very difficult to do it, okay? I'm very happy to hear alternatives from somebody, but I frankly don't think it's very easy to do. In which case, and again, there are issues of fiscal responsibility that we can't, how do we manage then the food subsidies, okay? Maybe we need to think about some clever ways of dealing with it, okay? I don't see why PDS should be giving out sugar or jaggery, okay? Let's take that off, okay? Why not add millet? Why not add some of the more coarse grains, okay? But we may need to get some more clever ways of dealing with this, and I can't tell you that I have all the answers, okay? But it seems to me that the original proposal probably just is not very workable, okay? So we might need to get somewhat more realistic. Social inclusion in education. Okay, you know, all I want to do is just show you this, okay? Most of the social inclusion in education schemes that Dr. Hamid talked about, they are all geared towards people at matric and post-matric levels, okay? But really, most of the inequalities in education are emerging in primary school level, okay? These are graphs from multivariate analysis. I have controlled for parents' income, household income, parents' education, all kinds of things, okay? And still what we find is that the reading and arithmetic skills of Dalit, Adivasi, and Muslim children is considerably lower than the skills of forward caste kids. Okay? And that just escalates over time. Okay, and I won't show you the data here, but even at a college level, we see extreme differences in performance between Dalit, Adivasi, and Muslims and others. And most of the problems began at primary school level. Okay? So I'm not suggesting we get rid of those post-matric schemes. I'm not suggesting we get rid of reservations. All I'm suggesting is that let's start focusing on primary school at least. Let's just start with a focus there somewhere. Okay, so here's my final slide on the 12th plan scorecard, okay, on these 4 issues that I talked about, okay, not everything else, because the overall, as I started, a plan is a fantastic document, okay. As far as dealing with challenges of success, I think it's very poor. Okay, because frankly, we haven't recognized that we have success, and we haven't recognized that what are its consequences. Okay, so it's very poor. The quality focus, I think it's moderate. Okay, you can actually see words like quality, and you can see some attempt at sort of motivating teachers in the education chapter. Okay, but I think it's pretty moderate. Okay. And ability to identify new challenges, again, I would say moderate. You can see some nods there to things like skill requirements, etc. There is a little bit of a section on cardiovascular diseases. But overall, we are still sort of very focused towards our old style of thinking. Okay? For example, if we really thought that we are dealing with some of the more diseases that require more sophistication and laboratory testing and regular monitoring, okay, we'd be focusing on laboratories rather than working towards sort of a skill upgradation of ASHA. Okay? So, I mean, I think we have gone very much towards a sort of a grassroots health approaches, which are very useful for epidemic diseases, but not as useful for diseases which require greater monitoring and laboratory interventions, drugs, etc., etc. As far as policy realism is concerned, I'm sad to say it's non-existent. Okay? It's very easy to sort of add things in, but realistically thinking about what can we do, we have very little of it. Okay? So let me give you an example. When we talk about social exclusion, okay, we consistently keep adding new groups into socially excluded categories. We never take anybody off. Okay, I mean, the OBC list has been growing and growing and growing, but nobody has been taken off of it. Okay? I don't mind it. I mean, I'm not trying to complain about a focus on providing benefits to disadvantaged groups. The problem is that when you have 65% of your population, okay, which is supposed to be targeted towards these receiving of these benefits, really it's very difficult to have, you're basically, where one should be using scalpel, we are using an axe. Okay? So in some sense, thinking through criteria, and by the way, this creamy layer criteria simply doesn't work. Okay, and I kind of have this memory of a recent newspaper article with creamy layer criteria, which talked about 60,000 rupee household income as the threshold for a creamy layer criteria, which would include a very large percentage of Indian households. So in some sense, thinking through who are our target groups, how can we sort of benefit them, leaving all the reservations, all the benefits in place, just thinking through who are the people who should be receiving those benefits would be a very helpful thing to do. Okay. Also politically sensitive thing to go do. I guess that's one of the reasons it's not been done. Okay, I think I shall end here and leave it to other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sonal, for that very wide-ranging, raising a very large number of issues there. And I'm so delighted that I decided to speak towards the end, because I'll have a chance to discuss many of the issues that you have raised. Since I was an author, one of the authors of not just of the 11th plan, but also several chapters in the 12th plan. Let's move to the discussion. The first speaker is Dr. Nisha Agarwal, who is, as you all know, is the CEO of Oxfam India.
Thank you, Santosh, and thank you, Sonal, for that presentation. I think in the morning we talked about, the huge gap between the plan and the implementation. And basically what Oxfam India does is we focus on implementation. We fund about 170 NGOs that work at the grassroots level in the 7 poorest states of India. And we really look at why programs and policies and plans don't reach the ground from the perspective of the most marginalized communities, and look at what works best and what doesn't work, and then feed that back into the policy dialogue. So it's really very much a focus on this kind of implementation gap that Dr. Hamid talked about. So from that perspective, then just a few comments. I think, first of all, the very term, I think using the term burden of success is something that I would really argue with. I think if investment in social sectors is supposed to be the foundation that is going to lead to a more equal opportunity and a more inclusive development path, then we are really lagging behind that. And before we declare success on access and so on and move on to quality, I think just the very basic access things are not happening in our country. So what needs to be done? I mean, Saida ji said, focus on what needs to be done. Unfortunately, as far as we see, yes, some things need to be done by the rest of society, but given that these are basic human rights, right to basic education, basic healthcare, basic food, a lot of the burden is still very much on the government. While other members can jump in and lend their hands, a lot of the basic foundation for providing a more equal opportunity, equal access kind of country, inclusive growth, whatever you want to call it, has to be done by the government, and it's not happening. So if we look at that, what is the first thing? I think public expenditures. While we can say it's growing up, she said it's increasing. Yes, obviously we were growing at almost double digits, so the size of the economy is rising. But as a share of GDP, the spend on basic health and basic education is rising only very, very gradually, and we're still at the bottom of the pile as far as most countries in the world are concerned. So to be spending, it's gone up barely from 0.9% of GDP to about 1 now. 1% of GDP on public health care. It is the lowest in the world. And unfortunately, no matter what one wants to do, you cannot say we want more of the private sector. 80% of the expenditures in this sector are already private, and the sector is largely unregulated, and the sector is largely not delivering either quality medicine or access to the poor. So it's not something we can say we are doing our bit now, everybody else needs to join hands. I think the basic infrastructure still needs to come from the government. It's not happening. Again, on health education, again, a promise has been made for many decades to increase the share of GDP on public spending on education from 3% of GDP to 6%. It's not happening. I mean, these numbers seem to just be stuck for decades and decades with, maybe an increase in the second decimal place from plan to plan. So without that, things are not going to happen in India. And certainly we would want to say we're still moving to a highly unequal society because the basics of providing equal quality education and equal quality healthcare to the masses are not in place. And this talk about, what she was referring to, you could say barefoot doctors or barefoot teachers. Second, lower quality teachers and lower quality doctors to poor people is just going to continue to create a nation where we are leading to greater and greater inequality, and that is not the way to go. We should be thinking about how we move to common education systems and a common system of healthcare for all. So that is my first point, that we are not declaring success. We are really not even moving in any way towards what one would begin to call success in human development. Yeah. Secondly, what would make the whole system work? The minute NGOs say, she says everybody complains, yes, we like to see more money, everybody will immediately say, yes, but the ones that we are spending is not reaching the poor. What would actually make that money reach the poor? Greater decentralization. I mean, we at the local levels have no ways of managing the system and of holding the system accountable. So until the panchayats, the gram sabhas, the communities themselves are empowered to take decisions, to fire a teacher who doesn't show up to work, it's not going to happen. And so money alone obviously is not the answer. Money is the first need, but greater decentralization, both of local PRI authorities as well as of communities, which is really built into things now, like NRHM, and which is what NGOs work on. That's the part we can do of strengthening community level monitoring, community level demand for accountability, and we are all doing that. But it's again, not just our job to create, greater demand for better governance. One area that we think as a substance, what I talked about was process and public expenditures, but substance is we talk now for the first time in the 12th five-year plan of early childhood development. That is going to be the key, that 0 to 3 age group, both for malnutrition as well as for learning outcomes, as well as for healthcare outcomes. And we talk about it, but we are yet to see how that is going to be put in place. And as we say, 2 years are getting on by, and we really don't see what is happening. And then finally, also on this monitoring of the gaps, we have to move away from a system of generalities to say 90% of the kids are in school. As soon as you start to look at dropout rates after primary enrollment and you start dividing them by the marginalized groups, by Dalits, by Muslims, by tribals, you begin to see a very different picture of India emerge immediately. And so all our monitoring has to be done by social groups and obviously by gender. Dr. Hamid talked about, the gap between Muslim girls and other children. Today, the most marginalized face in India is a tribal girl. I mean, tribals are 20 years behind other poor people. Muslims and Dalits are about 10 years behind. So really looking at groups of people and saying what's holding them back. And we heard about the violence and the dissatisfaction arising from a country that is going further and further towards the path of inequality. And lastly, I would say some need for prioritization. We are now sitting at a moment when the whole world is talking about what's going to happen in the post-MDG, post-2015 framework. Oxfam has done a policy note, we left it outside. Of course, it's very difficult to say for development we need only 10 things. But if you have 1,000 things, it also means there's 1,000 things nobody's ever going to monitor, and then it's too easy to say we don't have the data. So to be really serious about what is it that we would like to achieve in the 5-year plan, the 12th plan dialogue needs to be linked up to the MDG post-MDG dialogue, which it's not at the moment, and to come up with a set of priority goals that we can put on one sheet of paper and then develop the data systems that are needed. Because at the moment, policymakers also say to us during the 12th plan process, oh, well, we can't monitor anything because we have the data 5 years later. Well, whose problem is that? I mean, as a middle-income country, if we can't even have data to monitor our own goals and plans, then they're not really worth the paper they're written on. So prioritization, setting up data systems, monitoring, course correction so that we don't look back at the end of 5 years, but when we're doing a midterm appraisal of the 12th 5-year plan to say, this is off course, this is on course, let's accelerate this, let's put some energy and money behind this, and so on, I think is also a very top priority. Thank you.
Very good, Nisha, as usual. Very punchy, very provocative. Thank you very much for that. Now to Dr. Amirullah Khan for your 10 minutes.
Thanks,
Amir.
Santosh. And, thanks to Sonal, and I'm going to talk around her presentation. The special thanks to Sonal because she finally explained to me why I do so poorly in arithmetic and English. It must be my tribal background and so on. But I often wondered. But Sonal,